There are things you shared that you shouldn't have, and deep down, you know it. Some doors closed not because God said no, but because you spoke too soon. We're taught that honesty fixes everything, that transparency is always virtue. But spiritually, that's not always true. In fact, some of the greatest losses in Scripture didn't come from disobedience, but from revealing what should have stayed hidden. Here's the uncomfortable truth. God never asked you to explain everything. And yet you did. Dreams, plans, battles, callings. What if silence was never fear, but protection? What if some of the delays you're facing are actually warnings you ignored? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't popular, but it might explain more about your life than you're ready to admit. Silence as spiritual protection. Not everything God shows you is meant to be shared. There are moments when God speaks softly on purpose. Not because the message lacks power, but because it carries weight. In a world where everyone is encouraged to share everything instantly, silence feels uncomfortable. Yet in the spiritual realm, silence is often a shield. Some revelations are fragile at birth. They need prayer, not applause. They need time, not opinions. Scripture quietly teaches this, even when we overlook it. Jesus healed, restored, revealed truth, and then said, "Tell no one." That wasn't secrecy driven by fear. It was wisdom guided by timing. God understands that premature exposure can weaken what he is still forming. When something is still growing, noise can damage it. Think about Joseph, young, passionate, full of faith. God showed him dreams of authority and purpose. Instead of guarding them in prayer, he shared them too soon. The dreams were real, but the timing wasn't. What followed was betrayal, isolation, and a long detour. Not because God failed, but because silence was skipped. Sometimes the promise survives, but the process becomes harder. Here's a question worth sitting with for a moment. Have you ever shared something God placed in your heart, only to feel your peace drain afterward? That heaviness you felt wasn't coincidence. Often it's the Spirit gently saying, "This was meant to stay between us for now." Spiritual maturity shows itself in restraint. Proverbs reminds us that the wise store up knowledge, while the foolish pour everything out. Silence doesn't mean hiding. It means trusting God enough to let him protect what he started. When you speak less to people and pray more to God, clarity increases, anxiety fades, direction sharpens. This is the turning point many miss. Silence is not weakness, it is obedience. When you stop seeking validation and start guarding revelation, something shifts inside you. Faith deepens, discernment grows. And what God planted in secret begins preparing for public fulfillment at the right time, in the right way, by his hand alone. Never reveal your next move. God works best in hidden preparation. One of the most dangerous moments in life is when God begins preparing you for something new, and you feel the urge to announce it before it happens. There's a strange pressure to explain yourself, to justify your next step, to tell people where you're going. But spiritually speaking, movement explained too early often gets interrupted. God does some of his deepest work in seasons where nothing looks impressive from the outside. Look at Scripture carefully and you'll notice a pattern. Moses spent decades in the desert before leading anyone. David was anointed king, then sent back to the fields. Even Jesus lived 30 years in obscurity before speaking publicly. God doesn't rush visibility, he values formation. When preparation is still happening, exposure becomes a distraction rather than a blessing. There's something powerful about moving quietly. When you stop announcing plans and start strengthening foundations, fear loses its grip. You're no longer driven by people's expectations. You're guided by obedience. Silence during preparation protects focus. It keeps your heart aligned with God instead of reactions from others. This is where spiritual stamina is built. Let me ask you something honestly. How many times have you shared a plan only to feel doubt creep in through other people's opinions? Not everyone who listens believes. Some unconsciously project their own limitations onto your calling. God knows this. That's why He often calls you forward before others understand and asks you to walk without explaining. Nehemiah understood this deeply. When he began rebuilding the wall, he didn't reveal his full plan to anyone. Not because he was secretive, but because the mission required clarity. Opposition always comes when movement becomes visible. By staying quiet, Nehemiah preserved momentum. His silence wasn't fear, it was strategy. Here's the emotional turning point. God doesn't need witnesses during preparation. He needs availability. When you learn to move without announcing, to trust without applause, something inside you matures. Your confidence stops coming from validation and starts coming from alignment. And when the time is right, what was built in silence speaks louder than any announcement ever could. Never reveal your weakest battles. Some fights are won in private. There are struggles that are not meant to be shared while they are still active, not because you're pretending to be strong, but because some battles lose power only when they remain between you and God. The moment certain weaknesses are spoken aloud too early, they become labels instead of lessons, and labels, once given, are hard to shake. The Bible shows this tension clearly. Jesus in the wilderness faced hunger, temptation, and spiritual warfare alone. No crowd, no disciples, no explanations. That battle wasn't for public consumption. It was for spiritual alignment. If that moment had been interrupted, questioned, or debated, the outcome could have shifted. Some victories require solitude to mature fully. When you're in the middle of a fight, clarity is fragile. Opinions can confuse discernment. Well-meaning advice can dilute conviction. God often invites us into private wrestling not to isolate us, but to strengthen our dependence on Him. This is where prayer becomes honest, where fasting sharpens focus, and where the Spirit speaks without noise. Let me pause here and ask you something real. Have you ever shared a struggle too soon, only to feel weaker afterward instead of stronger? Sometimes the exhaustion doesn't come from the battle itself, but from managing how others see us while we're still healing. Even David, a man after God's own heart, poured out his deepest fears in private prayers before he ever faced enemies publicly. The Psalms reveal raw emotion, doubt, fear, desperation. But those words were first lifted toward God, not crowds. He processed vertically before he moved horizontally. That order mattered. Here's the spiritual shift most people miss. Not every weakness needs an audience. Some need an altar. When you learn to bring your struggles to God before bringing them to people, something changes. Strength grows quietly. Confidence returns steadily. And when the victory finally shows, it's not fragile, it's rooted. Never reveal what God is still healing. Exposure can reopen wounds. Healing is sacred, especially while it's still happening. One of the quiet mistakes many people make is talking about pain before it has fully lost its grip. When wounds are exposed too early, they don't harden, they reopen. God often works beneath the surface, restoring places no one else can see. Interrupting that process with explanations can slow what heaven is accelerating. Jesus modeled this in subtle ways. After intense moments of ministry, he withdrew, not to escape people, but to restore strength. Healing wasn't rushed. It wasn't performed for sympathy. It was protected through solitude. There's a reason Scripture often shows Jesus stepping away to pray after emotional or spiritual exertion. Restoration needs space. Pain explained too early can shape identity. Instead of saying, "I'm healing," we start saying, "This is who I am." God never heals to redefine you by the injury. He heals to free you from it. Silence during recovery allows God to rewrite the narrative without interference, without pressure to perform strength you haven't fully regained yet. Let me ask you something gently but honestly. Have you ever talked about a past hurt so much that it felt like it never actually left? Sometimes the wound survives not because God didn't heal, but because we keep revisiting it before the scar is strong. In the Gospels, the man healed of blindness didn't explain the process. He testified after the miracle was complete. He didn't debate his pain. He declared transformation. That order matters. Healing first, testimony later. God knows that premature exposure invites doubt, misunderstanding, and unnecessary scrutiny. Here's the emotional truth that changes everything. Healing doesn't need commentary. It needs time, prayer, and privacy. When you let God finish His work before explaining it, peace replaces pressure. Strength replaces fragility. And when your story is finally told, it sounds less like pain and more like freedom. Never reveal the season you're in. Not everyone needs access to your process. Every season carries a specific weight, and not everyone is meant to walk through it with you. Some seasons are loud, full of movement and visibility. Others are quiet, confusing, and deeply internal. The mistake many people make is narrating their process while God is still shaping it. When a season is named too early, it invites opinions that were never assigned to it. Scripture shows us this principle through timing. Ecclesiastes reminds us there is a time for everything, including silence. Seasons are spiritual environments, not announcements. God knows that some people only understand your growth once they see the fruit. Until then, explanation creates pressure, and pressure disrupts formation. Think about Elijah during the drought. He didn't broadcast where he was or what God was doing. He simply obeyed. Hidden by the brook, fed in isolation, he was being prepared for confrontation and authority. If that season had been explained to everyone, it would have invited doubt instead of faith. God protects certain seasons by keeping them unnamed. Let me pause and ask you something personal. Have you ever felt misunderstood simply because you were trying to explain a season people had no grace for? Not everyone has the capacity to honor what they can't relate to. God knows who can handle access and who cannot. When you constantly define your season to others, you start managing expectations instead of following instructions. Peace fades, clarity blurs, obedience turns into performance. But when you allow a season to stay between you and God, discernment sharpens. You move without apology, you grow without pressure. Here's the realization that shifts everything. Your season is not public property, it's a divine assignment. When you stop explaining where you are and start trusting why you're there, strength replaces confusion. And when the season changes, because it always does, the result speaks for itself, without a single explanation needed. Never reveal the instructions God gave you. Obedience loses power when explained. Some instructions from God are not meant to be discussed, only followed. The moment divine guidance is exposed to too many voices, obedience starts competing with logic. God often gives directions that don't make sense outside of faith, and explaining them too early invites doubt, resistance, and unnecessary debate. Not every instruction is meant to be understood by others. Look closely at Scripture, and you'll notice how often God spoke privately before acting publicly. When God told Abraham to leave everything behind, there was no committee, no group discussion, no explanation tour, just a call and a response. The power wasn't in the explanation. It was in the obedience. Faith weakens when it seeks approval. Explaining divine instructions has a cost. People filter your obedience through their own fears, limitations, and past failures. What God gave you in prayer gets reshaped by human logic. Over time, conviction softens. You start adjusting the instruction to sound more reasonable instead of staying faithful. and little by little, clarity fades. Let me ask you something that cuts deep, but matters. Have you ever delayed obedience because you felt the need to explain it first? That hesitation is often where momentum is lost. God moves in alignment, not in consensus. When he speaks, timing matters more than understanding. Noah didn't explain the ark. He built it for years, in silence, while being misunderstood. If he had tried to justify every measurement, every choice, every day of obedience, the flood would have arrived before the work was done. Some assignments require quiet endurance, not public validation. Here's the turning point that reshapes faith. Obedience doesn't need witnesses, it needs surrender. When you stop explaining what God told you to do and simply do it, authority returns. Peace settles in, direction sharpens. And when the outcome finally appears, no explanation is necessary. The fruit speaks louder than words ever could. Never reveal your next level before you reach it. Elevation attracts resistance. There's a reason growth often feels lonely right before a breakthrough. When God begins elevating you internally, he rarely announces it externally. Promotion in the spiritual realm happens quietly, long before it becomes visible. The danger comes when someone speaks about a new level before they've learned how to stand on it. Exposure before stability invites resistance. Scripture reveals this pattern again and again. David didn't talk about being king while serving Saul. Esther didn't announce her calling while still hidden in the palace. God elevates in layers, not leaps. Each level requires new discipline, deeper humility, and sharper discernment. When elevation is spoken too early, pride and pressure sneak in. There's also a spiritual law at work here. Visibility attracts opposition. The moment people sense you're rising, some become uncomfortable, not because you changed, but because your growth exposes stagnation. God, in his mercy, often hides you during transformation so you can grow roots before branches, strength before spotlight. Let me ask you something worth reflecting on. Have you ever felt resistance increase the moment you talked about where you believed God was taking you? That pushback isn't random. It's often premature exposure colliding with unfinished preparation. Jesus himself waited. Though fully aware of his identity, he didn't reveal everything at once. He spoke in parables. He revealed truth progressively. Even his disciples received understanding in stages. Elevation wasn't rushed. Authority was revealed as capacity grew. Timing preserved impact. Here's the realization that shifts perspective. Your next level doesn't need an announcement. It needs alignment. When you let God complete the work before you speak about it, elevation feels lighter, resistance weakens, and when you finally arrive, you don't have to convince anyone. Your presence carries the proof. Never reveal what God is about to restore. Some miracles collapse under scrutiny. There are moments when God is quietly putting things back together, piece by piece, and the worst thing you can do is announce it too soon. Restoration is delicate before it is strong. When something has been broken for a long time, even good attention can apply the wrong pressure. God often restores privately so the work can hold when it finally stands. The Bible shows this without shouting it. Jairus was told his daughter was dead, yet Jesus said, "Do not fear, only believe." Notice what followed: movement, not discussion. Jesus didn't stop to explain. He limited access. Only a few were allowed in the room. Restoration required boundaries. Too many voices would have turned faith into noise. When you tell people restoration is coming before it arrives, expectations rise faster than strength. Doubt sneaks in through questions. Skepticism enters through concern. Even encouragement can feel heavy when you're still standing on fragile ground. God understands this, which is why he often asks for trust before testimony. Let me ask you something quietly personal. Have you ever spoken hope out loud, only to feel crushed when someone questioned it? Sometimes the pain isn't the delay. It's the pressure of having to explain why the miracle hasn't shown up yet. Jesus restored sight, mobility, and even life itself, and often said, "Tell no one." That wasn't secrecy. That was protection. He knew that miracles need space to settle before they are shared. Restoration spoken too early becomes fragile. Restoration completed becomes undeniable. Here's the shift that brings peace. What God is restoring doesn't need commentary, it needs covering. When you let God finish rebuilding before you speak, strength replaces anxiety. Confidence grows quietly. And when restoration finally becomes visible, it stands firm. No defense required, no explanation needed. Never reveal your spiritual strategies. What's discerned in prayer loses power when broadcast. Not every insight you gain in prayer is meant to be shared out loud. Some strategies are given by God specifically for your situation, your timing, and your capacity. When spiritual discernment is spoken casually, it often gets diluted. What was meant to guide you quietly turns into information others consume without responsibility. In Scripture, strategy often came before victory, and usually in private. Joshua didn't crowdsource the plan for Jericho. Gideon didn't announce why his army was shrinking. These weren't motivational speeches, they were divine instructions. God knew that explaining the strategy would invite fear before faith had time to take root. There's a difference between testimony and tactics. Testimony points to God's faithfulness after the fact. Tactics operate in faith before the outcome is visible. When tactics are shared too early, people analyze instead of intercede, they question instead of trust. And suddenly, what God designed to be simple becomes heavy. Let me ask you something worth reflecting on. Have you ever shared a spiritual insight only to feel confused afterward, like the clarity slipped away? Sometimes that fog isn't spiritual attack, it's spiritual overexposure. Discernment needs stewardship, not applause. Jesus often knew exactly what he was going to do, yet didn't explain it. He moved with intention, not commentary. When asked questions designed to pull strategy out of him prematurely, he answered selectively. Silence wasn't avoidance, it was control. Authority doesn't explain itself. Here's the realization that restores balance. What God reveals to guide you isn't always meant to guide others. When you protect spiritual strategy, confidence increases, focus sharpens. Prayer becomes more effective, and when the victory finally manifests, you can testify freely because the strategy has already done its work. Never reveal your calling while you're still becoming it. Identity forms before it's declared. A calling is not just an assignment. It's an identity being shaped over time. One of the quiet dangers in spiritual life is speaking about who you're becoming before the transformation is complete. When identity is declared too early, it can turn into pressure instead of purpose. God forms you long before he introduces you. Scripture is careful with identity. Moses didn't walk around Egypt calling himself a deliverer while he was still unsure of who he was. Paul didn't immediately preach authority after his encounter on the road. He withdrew. Identity needed refinement. Calling without character collapses under weight, and God refuses to rush what must last. When you speak your calling too soon, expectations attach themselves to you. People begin watching, measuring, and comparing. Internally, you start performing instead of becoming. Growth slows. Authenticity thins. God's work inside you becomes harder to hear because the noise outside gets louder. Let me ask you something that requires honesty. Have you ever felt trapped by a version of yourself you announced before you were ready to live it? Sometimes, the exhaustion we feel isn't from obedience. It's from trying to live up to an identity God hasn't finished forming yet. Jesus knew exactly who he was, yet revealed it gradually. Even when others tried to name him prematurely, he redirected the moment. He let the Father define timing. Authority unfolded naturally because identity was secure. Nothing was rushed, nothing was forced. Here's the realization that brings freedom. You don't need to announce who you're becoming. Your alignment will reveal it. When you allow God to complete the internal work before you speak externally, identity feels lighter. Confidence becomes steady, and when the time comes to step fully into your calling, you won't need to convince anyone. You'll simply walk in it. Never reveal everything at once. God releases truth in layers, not all at once. There's a reason God rarely gives the full picture in a single moment. Truth, when delivered all at once, overwhelms instead of transforms. God is intentional with timing because growth happens in layers. When someone tries to reveal everything they know, everything they've learned, everything they've received, wisdom turns into excess, and excess dulls impact. Scripture consistently shows progressive revelation. The disciples walked with Jesus daily, yet understood him gradually. Parables came before explanations. Silence came before clarity. Even after miracles, understanding unfolded slowly. God wasn't hiding truth, he was pacing it. Capacity matters. What you receive too early becomes heavy instead of helpful. When you reveal everything at once, you remove mystery, and mystery is where faith stretches. God leaves space for dependence. He invites trust between moments of clarity. When people rush to disclose everything, visions, insights, conclusions, they often rob themselves of future depth. There's no room left to grow into. Here's a question worth asking yourself honestly. Do you feel pressure to explain everything you believe or everything God has shown you all the time? That pressure rarely comes from God. It often comes from insecurity or the need to feel understood. God never demanded full disclosure, only faithfulness. Jesus himself said, "I have many things to tell you, but you cannot bear them now." That sentence alone changes everything. Even truth, when mistimed, becomes a burden. God values your endurance more than your information. He teaches as you walk, not before you're ready to carry it. Here's the final shift that ties it all together. Wisdom knows what to reveal, when to reveal, and what to keep with God. When you stop feeling obligated to say everything and start trusting God's timing, peace settles in, faith deepens, and your spiritual life stops feeling exposed. It starts feeling protected. If there's one thing this journey reveals, it's this: silence isn't absence, it's alignment. Many of the struggles you faced weren't punishment or delay, they were protection. God was teaching you discernment, not fear, teaching you timing, not hiding. When you stop revealing everything, you start hearing him more clearly. Maybe now you understand why some things fell apart after you spoke. And maybe, for the first time, you see that God was never trying to take something from you. He was trying to keep something safe. What changes when you stop explaining your life and start trusting God with it? If this message spoke to you, leave a comment sharing what part challenged you the most. And share this video with someone who needs wisdom, not noise. And don't stop here. The next video goes even deeper, revealing what happens when God intentionally removes people from your life before your breakthrough. You won't want to miss it.